The world is full of untold stories, but some are so harrowing, so dark, they leave an indelible mark on our collective conscience. This is one of those stories. Sylvia Marie Likens was born on January 3, 1949 in Indianapolis, Indiana. She was a bright and vibrant teenager and was one of 5 children born to Lester and Betty Likens. As traveling carnival workers, her parents were often on the road for extended periods. When the family settled temporarily in Indianapolis, Sylvia and her younger sister, Jenny, were left without proper supervision for the summer of 1965. The solution came in the form of Gertrude Banaszewski, a woman whom the Likens family had met through mutual friends. For a small fee of $20 per week, Gertrude, a mother of 7, agreed to take Sylvia and Jenny into her home at 3850 East New York Street. The arrangement was intended to be temporary and straightforward, a way to provide the girls with a stable home and a watchful eye while their parents were away. When the 2 sisters first moved into the home, the atmosphere was, by all accounts, unremarkable. Sylvia and Gertrude's children got along well, spending their days listening to music, doing chores, and simply living life as normal teenagers. There was no immediate sign of the dark events to come, and for a short time the house provided the girls with a sense of security and a semblance of stability. However, the seemingly normal arrangement soured quickly, with the abuse beginning in mid-August of 1965. The motive for Gertrude's turn is widely believed to be jealousy, and her own struggles with depression and financial hardship further fueled her rage. Rumor has it that a late payment from Sylvia and Jenny's parents triggered the first incident of abuse. Gertrude began to unleash her fury on the unsuspecting sisters. Initially, the abuse was primarily inflicted by Gertrude herself, in the form of beatings with a paddle and other objects. However, as her cruelty intensified, she began to enlist her own children and several neighborhood friends in the torment, often pitting the children against Sylvia by accusing her of lying or spreading rumors. These early forms of abuse soon expanded to include starvation, forcing Sylvia to eat spoiled food or garbage, as well as humiliating acts and verbal assaults. Over the next few months, the torment escalated into a systematic and prolonged campaign of torture that is difficult to comprehend. Sylvia was subjected to a litany of horrific acts, including being burned with cigarettes and matches, branded with a hot needle, and tied up for days at a time. Her body became a canvas of violence, covered in over 150 wounds from cuts, bruises, and cigarette burns. In a chilling act of forced participation, her younger sister, Jenny, was at times coerced into taking part in the abuse, a dynamic that created a psychological trap for both girls. Perhaps the most infamous detail of this case is the brutal act of carving the words, "I am a prostitute and proud of it," into Sylvia's stomach with a hot needle. This act of extreme cruelty was not merely physical. It was a psychological assault aimed at stripping Sylvia of her identity and dignity. As the abuse reached its final stages, Sylvia was no longer a part of the household but a prisoner within it. She was confined to a single filthy room, and sometimes the basement, with no access to food, water, or a toilet. Weakened by starvation and the extensive injuries to her body, she became too frail to even walk. Her wounds were left to fester, and her cries for help went unheeded by both her captors and the neighbors who heard her screams. Isolated and utterly helpless, she awaited an end she knew was coming. On October 26, 1965, the horrific abuse of Sylvia Likens finally came to light. The call to the authorities was not made by a family member or a neighbor, but by Richard Hobbs, one of the neighborhood youths who had participated in the torture. He was allegedly concerned about the potential for getting in trouble after seeing Sylvia's lifeless body. His call, whether motivated by fear or a sudden pang of conscience, brought the nightmare to a close and began the long process of seeking justice for Sylvia. When police entered the Banaszewski home, the scene they discovered was one of utter degradation and horror. They found Sylvia's emaciated body, covered in more than 150 wounds, including severe burns, cuts, and extensive bruising, lying on a soiled mattress. Her injuries were so severe that her death was determined to be the result of a subdural hematoma, or a head injury, complicated by shock and severe malnutrition. The state of her body was a testament to the weeks of unthinkable suffering she had endured. The most critical turning point in the investigation came from Sylvia's younger sister, Jenny. As police took her from the home, she quietly asked them to get her out of there and she would tell them everything. Her testimony, given freely and with full detail, provided the crucial evidence needed to charge Gertrude and the other tormentors. As the only surviving witness to the months of torture, Jenny's words became the foundation of the prosecution's case, ensuring the full scope of the crime was revealed to the world. The trial of Gertrude Banaszewski and her co-defendants began in April 1966, a spectacle that drew national attention and packed the Indianapolis courtroom. The case brought to the stand not only Gertrude and her children, Paula and John, but also two neighborhood youths, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, all charged with the horrific crimes against Sylvia. The media frenzy surrounding the trial reflected the public's shock and disbelief at the acts of cruelty that had occurred in a seemingly ordinary suburban home. The prosecution's case relied heavily on the powerful and detailed testimony of Jenny Likens. Her chilling account of the months of torture, the beatings, the starvation, and the escalating sadism provided the jury with a first-hand look into the living hell her sister endured. She described how the abuse was not confined to Gertrude, but was a group effort, with Gertrude's children and other youths participating freely. Her testimony was the emotional centerpiece of the trial, painting a vivid picture of the suffering that had led to Sylvia's death. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned with its verdicts. Gertrude was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Her oldest daughter, Paula, was found guilty of second-degree murder and also received a life sentence. The other three co-defendants, John Banaszewski, Coy Hubbard, and Richard Hobbs, were convicted of manslaughter and received sentences of 2 to 21 years in the Indiana Reformatory. These verdicts sent a clear message, though many felt the sentences were too lenient given the depravity of the crime. The legal saga did not end there. The convictions were appealed, and in 1970, the Indiana Supreme Court reversed the verdicts for all defendants, citing prejudicial publicity and the trial court's refusal to grant a change of venue. Gertrude and Paula were ordered to undergo a retrial. In 1971, Gertrude was again found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, while Paula pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to a lesser term. The outcome of the second trial, though different, ultimately confirmed their roles in the crime. The story of Sylvia Likens continued long after the trials concluded, with a series of controversial paroles. Despite public outrage and protests, Gertrude Banaszewski was granted parole in 1985 after serving 20 years. She changed her name and lived out the remainder of her life in obscurity in Iowa, where she died 5 years later from lung cancer. Her daughter Paula also received parole in 1972 after serving just over 7 years. The three male co-defendants convicted of manslaughter were released from prison even earlier, in 1968, after serving less than 2 years of their sentences. The house on 3850 East New York Street, a physical monument to the horrors that unfolded within its walls, stood as a constant reminder for decades. It became a place of morbid fascination for true crime enthusiasts and a site of discomfort for the community. The house was eventually demolished in 2009, an action that provided a sense of closure for many and permanently removed the physical structure that had been so inextricably linked to Sylvia's torment. Perhaps the most significant and lasting impact of the Sylvia Likens case was its influence on Indiana law. Her murder highlighted a tragic failure of the system, where neighbors and others who suspected abuse had no legal obligation to report it. In the wake of the public outcry, Indiana passed mandated reporter laws, which require certain professionals, such as teachers and social workers, to report any suspected child abuse. The unspeakable tragedy of Sylvia Likens' life has been immortalized in various forms of media, serving as a cautionary tale and a stark reminder of human cruelty. The book titled The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum, as well as the film An American Crime, have brought her story to a wider audience. These works, while fictionalized, have ensured that Sylvia's ordeal remains a part of the cultural consciousness, prompting ongoing reflection on the themes of human depravity, responsibility, and the bystander effect. Ultimately, the case of Sylvia Likens is a story of profound inhumanity, but it is also a story that teaches us about the fragility of innocence and the power of human endurance. It is a stark reminder of the horrors that can unfold when cruelty is normalized and when a community fails to intervene. As we conclude this story, we ask you to take its lessons to heart. Remember Sylvia Likens not only as a victim, but as a symbol of the vital importance of speaking up and standing against injustice. Her life ended in unimaginable suffering, but by sharing her story and committing ourselves to protecting the most vulnerable among us, we can ensure that her memory serves a purpose far greater than the tragedy itself. Her death was not in vain if it inspires us all to be more vigilant, more compassionate, and more courageous in the face of cruelty.